Welcome back to another episode of the It Starts With You podcast. I am so excited and honored for our guest today, Bernie DeSantis III. Bernie, thank you for joining me.
My pleasure, Julie. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you.
Oh my goodness, we have so many things I want to talk about. So we met through a mutual connection where you were hosting a virtual event and I was able to participate in it. And I went to my team member and I was like, we need to ask Bernie about coming on the podcast because I want to geek out on all of the things, virtual events, virtual presence, virtual rooms, like this virtual world that we're in. And Bernie's an expert. So first, I'm going to do a little introduction and then we're going to dive into all the questions. So Bernie DeSantis III helps experts make virtual rooms feel less like hostage situations and more like actual human experiences. That is so funny because I just said Bernie to somebody. I was like, I don't want hostages in my room.
Right.
As the owner of Insignia Training Partners, Bernie works with businesses, associations, speakers, consultants, and subject matter experts to design and produce engaging webinars, workshops, masterclasses, and training programs. With over 2 decades in learning and development, fellow L&D person here, facilitation, leadership training, and virtual production, he knows the difference between dumping information on an audience and creating an experience that actually moves people. Bernie is part strategist, part producer, part facilitator, and part mustache-powered calm in the chaos. If you're only listening to the episode right now, you're going to want to go to our YouTube channel and check it out so that you can see Bernie's epic mustache. His work helps clients show up sharper, engage better, and turn virtual events into something more than just another Zoom meeting. So excited. And I do just have to say before I ask you the first question, I was part of that virtual experience that you and your team led, it was amazing. It was really cool.
Thank you. Yeah, it was exciting having you on there as well. It's really fun getting to work with a variety of different people, right? When you're talking about virtual, you could be talking about, corporate learning and development type programs where you're doing leadership or team building. There's so much space there. But then the other side of it is all these subject matter experts, the coaches, the consultants, the speakers, the authors, they're doing some really cool stuff out there. And I get to experience all of it. I get my own little mini masterclass every time I work with a new client. It's fun. It's
That
fun
is
space.
so true.
Yeah.
So your background is in, or as we heard, learning and development, leadership training. So if you want to just share with the listeners, give us a little like snippet of your background and what led you to now starting Insignia Training Partners.
Yeah, glad to. Well, first thing I'll do is make the correction. I'm actually the second owner of Insignia. I bought the company January 1st of 2022. So I am now 4 years in as owner of the company. It was founded in 2007 by my predecessor, Ann Debus. The company was founded for staff augmentation. So we were sending facilitators and coaches and designers out to larger organizations to help them build out their training programs. Obviously, when COVID hit, everybody had to go virtual. And anybody who was doing in-person stuff had to make the switch. A lot of organizations weren't able to do that very well.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll pause there and back up a little bit. In the wisdom of my teens, I went to college and got myself a marketing degree, thinking all the widgets need to be marketed and sold. And so naturally, when I couldn't find work, my first job ended up being in sales. So I was working for Quicken Loans, mortgage banker, making 100 phone calls a day, smile and dial routine. Took me about 60 days on the phone to realize that was not the life for me. And so I started to look for other opportunities using my skill sets. I have a little bit of charisma. I'm a fairly good communicator. I found a job posting for a leadership development trainer position.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, all right, cool. Let me throw my hat in the ring. I had never led a team. I had never trained anybody, but I did in fact get the job. I became their very first leadership development trainer, and my role there was in experiential training. So I was taking large groups of these up and coming leaders, and we would go do ropes courses. We would do SWAT team trainings. I would build these immersive full day activities. Sometimes there would be some gamification to it, and they would work on the same skill sets they'd use to run a team: problem solving, communication, teamwork, strategic thinking. But as you can imagine, when people are dangling 3 stories in the air by a little rope, or they have bullets flying by their head, or they think they're just playing a game, they have some very interesting and I'll even say sometimes very profound breakthroughs about how they operate, how they think, how they respond to stressful situations. And so that's how I got my start in learning and development. And I spent
Mhm.
about 15 years in corporate, and then met my predecessor, started doing some work with her. And one day she made me an offer I couldn't refuse when she was ready to retire. And that kind of brings us to today. But the virtual aspect really happened as a result of COVID, right? You probably remember right before COVID, everybody was doing in-person stuff. There's a little bit of virtual
Mhm.
happening from time to time. But then all of a sudden the shift happened and everybody was virtual 100%. So we were really lucky to be working with some large blue chip clients at the time, Johnson Johnson, Ernst& Young, McKinsey, and we were effectively managing all of their training that was being done virtually
Wow.
throughout the course of COVID. So we ended up doing close to 3,500 events just with those three organizations for their
Wow.
certified professional education credits. So we saw a lot of dumpster fires, especially early, right? A lot of what didn't work. Let's try this. Let's do 27 polling questions and hope that everybody, stays engaged and involved. And it was rough. But throughout the course of that time, we developed a lot of best practices. We saw a lot of what to do, as in addition to a lot of what not to do. And coming out of COVID, I started to look at the general landscape, and I saw there were a lot of these small business owners, the coaches, the consultants, speakers, and authors that were doing events, and they needed the same type of help that these corporate clients did in early stage COVID. And so we started working with them and helping them to produce master classes and roundtables and workshops, applying a lot of the very same skill sets and things that I learned way early on the ropes courses to virtual, right? Because I mean, you
Mhm.
don't really want to be the sage on the stage anyway, whether you're in person or virtual anymore. It's just not quite as effective as it used to be.
Mhm.
But you especially can't do it in virtual. There's too many distractions in this
Mhm.
space to just talk at people for an hour.
Mhm.
And so that's really what we do is we help them to engage with that audience, whether it's purely for the learning and behavior change, skill acquisition, or we're talking about business development for an audience that you're trying to develop as prospects.
Mhm. Oh my gosh, there's so many things I was just like jotting down notes. It's like, wait, I want to dive into this. I want to dive into this. First of all, just from the your background and experience and just like, again, leadership development geek here, right? My background is working in corporate. Now, obviously, I have a leadership development firm and just like hearing all of those things and being thrown into starting to do training. And you did quite intense, like that experiential leadership training, like starting with that type of stuff. That is quite the experience.
Yeah, oh yeah, I dove in feet first, like all the way up to my eyeballs, and it was so amazing. And but I will say this, like being able to start with that type of learning,
Mhm.
um, is very different than the more traditional clinical, if you will, type of educational style of learning, right? Like instructional design is one thing, but creating an experience is a little bit different.
Mhm.
And it was really cool to be able to start there and think about how I'm able to impact people through activity and interaction and engagement, as opposed to the somewhat linear thinking of instructional design, having objectives, right? Just very, very what's the word I want to say, military style, if you will,
Mhm.
right? Very rigid.
Mhm.
And so being able to merge the two is really fun. I have a ton of instructional designers that are classically trained,
Mhm.
in on my bench that I work with, and being able to kind of meld the two and say, okay, these are the learning objectives. This is how we functionally get from A to Z for a course, but then look at it and say, okay, but what's the experience? What are people going to
Mhm.
remember from it? What are they going to be able to apply from it? What's the behavior change that we want to see? Right. And thinking through that from an experience standpoint, it's really fun. It's really, really cool.
I love that even just like that what is the experience like? I think even just for those of you listening, and I know those of you listening run the gamut of what, Bernie and I were talking about. Some of you are in corporate and maybe you're going through virtual programs or maybe your experience like you're on the receiving end of some of those virtual programs or you are a business owner or something who's running those. We all can get better on what does that experience look like and oftentimes, again, especially I will say in like the organizational standpoint, there is sort of this kind of stuck in the learning objectives and, the slides and how we all can get better at that. One of my first questions for you though is going from like, I'm imagining, you're doing the ropes course, you're doing all of that. And then we talk about virtual. One of the things that I still hear from people, even though we've been in this virtual landscape now for a while, is that they just don't like it as much. It's just not as good. It's just we'd rather have in person. I think there's of course benefit to both, but what do you say when people say like we just don't like virtual?
First I'll say that you probably haven't been to one of my virtual
Yeah.
events, as a start.
There we go. Boom,
Right.
boom.
All right. Like you can still have a good experience in the virtual space. Is there a benefit to being in person? Of course there is. There's going to be natural energy in a room. You're able to actually reach out and shake someone's hand, share a meal with somebody, right? There are a lot of benefits to doing in-person events. But virtual can be equally as engaging, but it has to be intentional. You have to think through how you're going to do it throughout. Again, you can't just talk at people because talking really isn't training, right? Telling isn't training. You've probably heard that before.
Hmm.
Um, and you have to think through how you're going to engage with that audience, get them from point A to B, but through the activity. People really sleep on things like intentional polling questions, having really intentional breakout rooms, setting the tone of the room, how, why, what you're going to do in there. They just say, go into the breakout room and have a conversation. Well, if you don't tell people what to talk about, they're probably not going to have a very deep conversation,
Hmm.
right? Using chat prompts is such a simple thing that you can do. Just have somebody pop a question in from time to time and get people off the wall, right? The wallflowers to engage. There's
Hmm.
so many things that you can do here, and we haven't even talked about add-on type of applications and programs, but there's so much that you can do here to enrich the experience that a lot of people just miss entirely.
Hmm.
They just want to talk at their audience for an hour and lecture. And again, there's too much here to distract people.
Hmm.
I'll give you an example, Julie. Like here, my home setup, I work from 7 monitors. Okay, I have this giant display.
Wow.
I have my email over here. I have Zoom here. I have Slack here. I have Teams here. I have Facebook over here. I have a security system over here. I could literally be watching a baseball game on this TV over here. You would never know it. But, I have Zoom on this one monitor down
Yep.
here in the middle. So I could be showing up to your event. Meanwhile, I've got all of this other stuff, just technology, right, going on around me.
Hmm.
All it takes is an email, a DM from somebody, and I'm going to start to disengage. Not to mention, I'm working from home. I've got a
Hmm.
wife. I've got 3 kids. I've got a
Hmm.
dog. I've got 2 cats. There's literally always something happening in the
Hmm.
house to distract. So if you're not intentional about how you show up here and how you engage your audience, you will lose them. It's really
Hmm.
that simple, right? But if you are intentional about the experience as the facilitator, as the host of it, you can create an equally engaging experience here in Zoom or in Teams or whatever the platform is that you're using. But you have to think through, how is it different from in person to virtual? You can recreate it most times in virtual, but people don't want to think that through. They just want to turn on the camera and start talking and hope people pick up what they're laying down. And it's
Hmm.
ineffective.
Yeah, and I mean, you started talking about some like the lecture. Like, what would you say are some of the biggest mistakes that people make in the virtual? So the lecturing and not thinking through, like, what are some of the other things that you're like, red flag?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you'd be shocked at some of the basic stuff that people really miss. Obviously, like if you're doing podcasts and things, you should have a decent camera, you
Hmm.
should have a microphone, you should have maybe some lighting, right? Things like that should be basic. And you would think that if people are doing virtual events, they would also have that same thought. But
Hmm.
they oftentimes miss, or they don't think about how they are showing up here. Having a good camera makes a difference. Having a quality microphone makes a difference. How you are lit makes a difference in
Hmm.
how people perceive and receive you here. And a lot of people miss on that very basic thing. When you're talking about the technology in and of itself, right? Internet is finicky at best. Being on Wi-Fi is sketchy in some places. If you have the ability to hardwire, you should hardwire every single time you're going to be doing a virtual meeting or event or call because it creates a more stable connection.
Hmm.
Like the most basic stuff I see people miss on all the time. They are absolutely an utmost subject matter expert on the thing that they talk about, but they miss on some of the most basic stuff because they don't think about it. They don't know what they don't know. I like to refer to it as sort of unconscious incompetence, right? They just don't know what they don't know about being here in this space.
Hmm. Yeah, what would you say? And I mean, that is so true. The especially doing, big events, keynote events, things like that. I know like the connection, the Wi-Fi, like how can I have all of the backup so that this thing does not go down? And I know
Right?
I've experienced that on like the receiving end and as an audience member of somebody who, and it's you have grace for them if their internet goes down or things, but it is just all of those factors that make it a part of the experience. And it does make it then, like, I've been on events where it's almost just as, I mean, of course I love in person, but it's almost just as good because all of those things have been considered. how do you and your team partner with people then when you're talking about like creating these experiences?
A lot of our clients come to us with, an idea. Somebody tells them somewhere along the way, they're like, hey, you should do a master class, you should do a webinar, you should do a
Mm,
workshop. And they'll come and they really don't know anything more than their own subject matter expertise. And so we will have to work with them from tip to tail. What
mm,
is the content? What is the title? What's the description? A lot of the very basic foundational stuff. We'll help them build out the content if that's what they need. Everything from a PowerPoint to all of the activities that we do on the event. My team manages all of the front facing marketing.
mm,
So like we put up the LinkedIn event, Facebook event, Eventbrite. We're on Journals TV. There's several places that we're able to put it out there. So we support marketing of the event as well. And then big piece is the live event
mm.
production in of itself. So we're there working with our client hands on the day of their event. So while we've rehearsed and we've practiced leading up to the event, we're actually there with them, managing and pushing all of the buttons for them.
Mm.
So the worst thing that you can be is a distracted facilitator. If you're worried about the waiting room and the breakout rooms and the polling questions and the chat prompts and playing the video and playing the music and hitting record and doing all of the things, you can't engage with the people that are there effectively.
Hmm. I mean, that is amazing because I know that like just that can feel so overwhelming when it's, for me, when I've had to do that throughout my time of doing virtual events. I have an assistant who will come on and help sometimes, but it is like, yeah, launch the poll, answer the question, keep the energy of the room. And so you're there to support and help with all
All
of
of it.
that.
Yep, all of that, right? And sometimes we take a little bit more of a backseat co-pilot. Like they've got all of the things. They've been like you could probably easily do a virtual event every single month with the content that you have already developed. You don't have to change anything. All you've got to do is put it out there, market it, and show up. And so we do that with some of our clients. We are literally there just to be their co-pilot on event day. And as an experienced facilitator, when you know. Having that extra set of hands makes a difference.
Hmm. What would you say to, so obviously the people hosting it, I mean, it's just so interesting to me because again, there's been such this, we didn't do a whole lot of, especially from a corporate standpoint. Maybe we had, I worked in an organization where we did offer virtual events for some of our, leadership skills training, and there wasn't as many people that would typically sign up, but it still wasn't that common. And then obviously COVID, and now it is kind of the name of the game. But I still, when I'm talking to organizations, sometimes they're still telling me that in this hybrid landscape where people are working all over, that people are still struggling with like virtual etiquette and presence, and that, how to, having your camera on in meetings or not cutting each other off. Like that's still a struggle. I'm talking to an organization right now. We're talking about doing a program. They're like, we need our people to get better at doing virtual. What are some tips that you have for people on having that virtual presence?
Well, I'll circle back to the things that I mentioned earlier, right? Just as a basic, we know that communication is made up of three parts: what you say, how you say it, and then how you physically display what you're saying, right? The body language or physiology. So we have to recognize that here in this space, there is a camera and a screen between how people see us. There is a microphone and speakers and how people hear us. So we need to be intentional about how we show up and do the things here. Again, good microphone, good camera, good lighting so that you're seen and heard properly. And then again, beyond that, make sure that you understand who the audience is that you're talking to, right? I do a lot of virtual coffees as an example, right? Just one-on-one conversations. But if I showed up looking like Nick Nolte's mugshot, right? Like, all disheveled, like he's just not really there. You probably are not going to have a great first impression of me as, that person showing up versus somebody who has taken a little bit of time to think about how they show up and use this real estate here. Those would be the two main things that I would say people should do is think about how you show up. Think about how you judge other people when they show up to
Mm-hmm.
your events and start there, right? To turn it back on you and point the finger and be like, okay, how am I doing with those things?
Mm-hmm.
And then, the greater events, again, think about engagement. How do you get the audience to interact with you or give you feedback more often? Every 3 to 5 minutes in virtual is ideal. You want the audience to interact or engage with you somehow, and don't go more than 10 minutes of monologue. You will
Mm-hmm.
lose people pretty quickly.
I love those reminders of the presence because I mean, that's one of the things that I love talking about is having a strong presence and influence. And a lot of the times people think about it in person or when they're going to
Oh, yeah.
meetings. But sometimes I feel like we kind of miss, okay, it's a virtual meeting day for me or things like that. It's like, well, that still matters. Like all of
It's
that presence that
so
you have
professional.
matters.
Absolutely. Yeah, right. Like think about that for a second. COVID made it normal for you to show up as you are, right? There's nothing wrong with showing up as yourself. In fact, you should be as genuine and authentically you as you possibly can. But there is a difference between showing up as you are and showing up as yourself. A lot of people show up to a virtual event or virtual meeting and they're wearing the shirt they went to bed in, right? And they've got the
Mhm.
little coffee stain over here. They haven't thought about, what's behind them. I've been to some virtual meetings where there are inappropriate things on people's dressers and things like you have to think about your background and the background noise. There's so much to it that people just don't really think through those things.
Hmm. Where have you seen, so obviously you've seen, large organizations and helped them do it. You've seen small business owners, entrepreneurs. Where have you seen a big difference? Like if you've worked with somebody who maybe had been, I don't know if you had an example of somebody who had been doing their own virtual events and it wasn't going well, and then you came in and helped them. Like where have you seen some of the biggest almost ROI in having a well done virtual training or event?
Yeah, absolutely. I think biggest return on investment. Well, I'll talk about two things. One on the more corporate side, I've been doing Johnson and Johnson events for since COVID. And we're still working with them on some of their global town halls. They've tried doing some of them on their own, and it's not that they can't. It's just that after you've done several thousand of them, like you
Hmm.
understand what works, and they like to have somebody there with them to run the show. And the difference between how a message is received across thousands of people is different from a well-managed event versus one that maybe is a little bit haphazard. So they continue to work with us because they know that when they step on stage, the virtual stage, their audience, the internal employees are going to get the message. They are going to have a good experience, and that matters for company culture, right?
Hmm.
On the more small business owner side of things, one of my favorite, I have two clients that I work with that I would say are my two favorites for different reasons. One is a gentleman by the name of Bob Russo. He is a death doula. I mentioned him earlier, and
Hmm.
if you don't know what a death doula is for all the listeners, you may be more familiar with the term birth doula or a
Hmm.
midwife, right? So someone helping to bring children into the world. A
Hmm.
death doula is the opposite side of that, right? They help people on their way out of the world, and sometimes it's spiritual. We're not
Hmm.
talking about euthanization or assisted suicide or anything of that nature, but helping people come to terms and understand end of life.
Hmm.
So he does a bi-weekly virtual death cafe where people get to come in and have conversations around whatever is on their mind around death.
Wow.
Could be their own end, it could be that of a loved one, maybe they lost somebody tragically, maybe it was a suicide. There's a lot to end of life that is
Hmm.
very mysterious for people. I won't say that Bob has all of the answers, although he has a lot of them. Sometimes just being able to have that conversation with someone who's impartial, not going to judge you on it, is exactly what people need. And being able to hold that space for people is truly amazing.
Hmm.
So I love those type of events where they have a very deep meaning for people. On the other side, talking a little bit more about return on investment, one of my favorite clients to work with this is a young lady by the name of young lady, like she's in her 20s. Uh,
Hey, anyone can be a young lady or lad.
she's an amazing woman. She and I partner on a lot of different things, but she is one of my favorite clients to work with. She is an AI strategist.
Hmm.
So she helps her clients, small business owners, implement AI in their business, specifically using Notion. She originally started doing it with ChatGPT. She wanted to use virtual events as part of her business development strategy. First couple of them, as I tell most of my clients, it will be it's a little bit of a dumpster fire, and not because you're not trying, not because you're not intentional, because you need to figure out how the machine works and how you are on stage and doing all of those things, marketing, messaging, nurturing, right? It's all part of the process and it takes time to figure that out. But I got to see Allison over the course of a year and a half go from having 4 or 5 people show up to her event and not really getting any sales from it to now I think her next event is on the 16th of this month, so two days from today. And she's sitting at 200 registrations. She's expecting
Wow.
to have at least 60 people show up to the event confirmed, ready to go. And she will likely sell out her program this month like she has every month for the last 5. right? So
Wow, that's
it
amazing.
it really is an amazing transformation when you can somebody just puts the time and effort into creating a good experience for their audience
Hmm.
and nurturing it, right? And working the process.
Hmm. You know, when you were just talking, like one of the words I just jotted down, especially, I mean, those are great. Thank you for sharing those examples. And I think what it also demonstrates for everyone listening to is just this reminder of these two things that are coming up for me is that we can use this gift of this virtual space for so many different things. I mean, we were just talking about death doula to business development to engaging cultures, like all on these radically like different ends. But then the word that really came up was just this idea of like connection, because I think that has been such a big conversation the last couple of years. Research around people feeling more like we're more connected than ever, but more disconnected than ever, and this push again to get people connected. But what I'm hearing you say is like what you've been able to help people do is we can create that
Absolutely.
insane connection for people, and we're able to connect with people that you otherwise would have to fly and travel to go see.
That's absolutely true. Yeah, I mean, the reality is really like we could be a global organization in seconds, right? We're here in the US and we could be doing business in Australia 30 seconds from now, given the tools that we have available to us today. And so, the companies that are leveraging this, be it for internal communications, right? You have remote workers and all of the things, creating a good experience for them, or again, sales and business development. It gives you access to audiences that you may not have had otherwise, just by geographical restriction. But you make a really good point. People are seeking community. They are seeking connection. A good friend of mine who works in the mental health and suicide prevention space, he talks about having a friend deficit. Particularly men, we don't have a lot of long-term relationships. We don't easily make friends. And whether we want to admit it or not, we always seek connection and community. We always want to find like-minded individuals, people who have similar struggles that can help us through ours. Like though that it's
Mm,
part of who we are as human beings. And being able to help facilitate that in the virtual space for people, it's amazing. Like,
mm,
yes, I do what I do for to get paid, right? I want my business to make money, but I really enjoy and get fulfilled by the work that I get to do and help other people to do. Because there are a lot of subject matter experts out there that have that same fear that everybody else does of getting on stage, getting on camera. If I can help them to overcome that and deliver their message to people who need to hear it, I mean, in life, I won as far as I'm concerned.
mm. Yeah, and I feel like you what this convert and this is why I literally love having a podcast and bringing on different guests because I always walk away with like multiple things. But it's interesting. I just feel like I even just had an energy shift around virtual and a reframe. And I feel like I'm so open to it. Like I've been doing virtual, I've been hosting virtual events, like again, way back in the day from training. I do webinars for my business for launching of programs, although I'm like, I probably could even get better at these, Bernie. We'll have to talk. Uh, but it's like I feel like I'm already open to it, but I will just be totally honest and admit like there's still sometimes this like virtual. Like when you find out when an event got moved to virtual, like I still kind of have this but just in our conversation, it's just reframing this idea of instead of seeing it as like, oh, it's virtual, it's like, wow, think of the opportunity that this opens up for me to create connection with people when you can't always travel to go see them, or there's people that you just wouldn't be able to do that. It's that sense of if you're intentional about it, to create that connection and community and seeing it as an amazing opportunity versus of like, oh, it's virtual.
Hmm. Well, it is that reframe, right? Like, unfortunately, a lot of people have had really bad experiences here
Mhm.
in the virtual space. I mean, it is what it is. Somebody gets traumatized, they tend to remember that
Mhm.
trauma, and even if they fixed it, they still show up to all of those similar situations, and they're like, "Ooh, I don't want that to happen again." So I get it. When people hear webinar, they hear of Zoom, they're like, "Ah, I don't really want to do it." But again, the reality is if you are intentionally, if you do create a good experience for people, they will walk away just like they would from an in-person event thinking that was a great use of my time. I really learned something. I can leverage that. I would do that again. I would recommend this to someone else. But again, all it takes is just understanding the tool and being intentional about how you show up here. And it can be equally as good a stage as any other.
Hmm. And I also think what I just came up was like everyone listening too, it's almost like holding up a mirror to go, part of the reason you might not like virtual or it might feel like, oh, it just doesn't work as good. Our trainings aren't as good. It might not be the platform itself. It might be you saying this in a loving way, right? Like as Bernie, as you probably say to them, it's like, it's not because it's virtual. It's because it wasn't designed to
Right.
have the intention and the experience to what it could be. And so hopefully those of you listening are taking away even just some of those basic tips that we can all get better at, but also I mean, I think one of the biggest things standing out from our conversation is to really think about how can I design the experience and be thinking about where I want to take people, what I want the result to be, and designing it that way versus just like, all right, I'm just going to turn on the camera and just talk to everybody.
That's right. Virtual is not the ugly step sibling.
Yeah.
Like it really deserves its own respect for sure.
Mhm. Okay, I have one or two more questions and then we'll wrap up. But
Fire
I
away.
would love to just hear because I know you have a lot of background. You've worked in organizations, you're an entrepreneur, you're a dad, So what would you say are some of the biggest just lessons that you've learned in kind of pivoting and shifting in your career and running the business? Anything that you'd want to share with us?
Oh my goodness. So many things potentially come to mind. I'll start with saying this. Boundaries are important as a business owner and as having a family. It's very easy to get, sucked into your business and ignore the family or vice versa. There's nothing wrong with loving your family and wanting to spend time, but you have to make sure that you balance your business as well. So having those boundaries is super important. It's a lesson that I have to remind myself of every single day.
Yep, me
Right.
too.
Making sure that I have that balance. Absolutely. My calendar looks like a Skittles bag threw up all over it most of the time. But having those boundaries is super important. I think the other thing is, really value your network and focus on building relationships because you really don't know where your next opportunity is going to come from, and you don't necessarily know the value of the relationship until you start to pursue it a little bit because there's some really cool stuff that people are doing that if you take it at your surface, you may not really get into it, right?
Hmm.
Focus on the relationship, not necessarily the volume of the network. But your network is, as they say, your net worth.
Hmm. I love those tips. And yes, I'm like, yep, boundaries. Need to work on those. And then, yeah, the network and relationships. And I love one other thing I'll just add that you said before is like doing those coffee chats. I think when we went virtual, with COVID and everything, I think a lot more people were doing that. And then everyone got kind of busy and they're like, oh, I'm on the camera all the time. And I think that scaled back a lot. But that might be a way to brush that off again and reconnect with people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, I still do a little bit of in-person networking, but I mean, obviously, as a virtual producer, this is kind of my space. I
Mhm.
do most of my networking this way. Like, I don't have a commute. I don't have to drive to the coffee shop. I can have 8 to 10 virtual coffees in a day, where if I was going to do it in person, I might, have two or three. So, from a volume perspective, I can get more of them in. From a relationship standpoint, though, in person, like again, breaking bread, having a coffee with somebody, it's hard to beat that from a relationship perspective.
Bernie, thank you so much for this conversation. I'm like, wait, how did our time go so fast? So, for those listening who want to connect with you, learn more, either just maybe get coffee with you virtually or to talk more about how you support people, how can they get connected with you?
Well, you can definitely find us online, insigniatrainingpartners.com, or you can go to insigniatraining.com, not partners.com, insigniatraining.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn. That is my chosen social media space. Look me up there, find the mustache, and you've got me.
I love it. And we'll also make sure that we drop those in the show notes. So, Bernie, thank you so much for the tips. Thank you for the reminders for myself and for those listening. I have multiple virtual events coming up over the next couple weeks. So I'm like, ooh, how can we level these up? So thank you for everyone listening. As a big thank you to Bernie, make sure that you share this episode out, tag him, reach out, let him know what stood out for you, what tip you're taking away. And of course, when you have those opportunities that you need some help with that virtual space, make sure you hit Bernie and his team up. So thank you, everybody, and have a great rest of your morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you're listening to this.
Thanks for having me, Julie. Enjoy the day.